Sylph is a mythological spirit of the air. The term originates in the 16th century works of Paracelsus, who describes sylphs as invisible beings of the air, his elementals of air. Since the term sylph itself originates with Paracelsus, there is relatively little pre-Paracelsian legend and mythology that can be confidently associated with it, but a significant number of subsequent literary and occult works have been inspired by the idea. Robert Alfred Vaughan noted that the wild but poetical fantasies of Paracelsus had probably exercised a larger influence over his age and the subsequent one than is generally supposed, particularly on the Rosicrucians, but that through the 18th century they had become reduced to machinery for the playwright, and opera figurantes with wings of gauze and spangles. Etymology: the word is possibly a portmanteau from Latin sylvestris and nympha, sylvestris being a common synonym for sylph in Paracelsus. Anthon and Trollope note a similar usage in the Aeneid, where sylvestris is taken as an elliptical form of nympha sylvestris. Jacob Grimm uses this phrase as a gloss for the Anglo-Saxon woodumana, which he also takes as a metaphorical name for an echo. Jan Baptist van Helmont, a near-contemporary of Paracelsus and coiner of the word gas, uses sylvestris in the sense of wild to describe gaseous emissions, which may be connected to the Paracelsian usage. Thorpe's Northern mythology connects the adjective sylvesters and the related sylvaticas to European wild man legends. A related idea is that sylph is from a hyper-urbane respelling of a Latin neologism sylphs, but in either case this connection to the Latin root silva is supported by Paracelsus' use of sylphs as a synonym for Schraparagraphtlein, a German word for a tree spirit or especially an earth spirit in his Liber de Sanguine Ultramortem. An alternative theory is that it derives from the ancient Greek I floronii, which a number of etymological sources gloss as moth, though the most authoritative reference for ancient Greek, a Graeca Euro-English lexicon, is unaware of this sense and defines it as a cockroach, or bookworm. French etymological sources often derive it from a Latin word sylphus, glossed as genius, and only known from inscriptions rather than literary Latin. The Deutsches Paragraph-Wörterbuch however indicates that this idea arises from a 19th-century misreading of the inscription in question. Similarly, the I floronii etymology can be dismissed from the lack of an objective historical and thus semantic connection. The idea of an intentional portmanteau is also considered doubtful, though extensive evidence can be found that indicates that Paracelsus considered the various sylvan spirits and wild men of legend to be examples of sylphs, which he occasionally took to be earth elementals rather than air elementals. Alchemy and Literature. The Swiss-German physician and alchemist Paracelsus first coined the term sylph in the 16th century to describe an air spirit in his overarching scheme of elemental spirits associated with the four classical elements. Paracelsus drew from earlier sources, but his systematic treatment of the idea was definitive, with the names of 3 of the 4 types having originated in his works. These ideas were adopted in Rosicrucianism and were widely encountered in subsequent Hermetic literature. In the Liber de Nymphais of the Philosophia Magna, Paracelsus discusses the characteristics of the elementals at length. Sylphs, he says, are rougher, coarser, taller, and stronger than humans. The elementals are said to be able to move through their own elements as human beings move through air. Because of this, sylphs are the closest to humans in his conception because they move through air like we do, while in fire they burn, in water they drown, and in earth, they get stuck. The French pseudo-novel Comte de Gablus was important in passing sylphs into the literary sphere. It appears to have originated the derivative term sylphid, which it uses as the feminine counterpart to sylph. While modern scholars consider Comte de Gablus to have been intended as a satire of occult philosophy, many of its contemporaries considered it to be an earnest exposition of occult lore. Its author, Abbé Copyright de Montfaucon de Villars, was assassinated on the road in 1673 and one rumor had it that he had been killed by a gang of sylphs for disclosing their secrets. One of the best-known discussions of sylphs comes with Alexander Pope. In Rape of the Lock, Pope satirizes French Rosicrucian and alchemical writings when he invents a theory to explain the sylph. In a parody of heroic poetry and the dark, and mysterious alchemical literature, and in particular the sometimes esoterically classical heroic poetry of the 18th century in England and France, Pope pretends to have a new alchemy, in which the sylph is the mystically, chemically condensed humours of peevish women. In Pope's poem, women who are full of spleen and vanity turn into sylphs when they die because their spirits are too full of dark vapours to ascend to the skies. Belinda, the heroine of Pope's poem, is attended by a small army of sylphs, who foster her vanity and guard her beauty. The poem is a parody of Paracelsian ideas, inasmuch as Pope imitates the pseudoscience of alchemy to explain the seriousness with which vain women approach the dressing room. In a slight parody of the divine battle in Pope's Rape of the Lock, when the Baron of the poem attempts to cut a lock of Belinda's hair, the sylphs interpose their airy bodies between the blades of the scissors. Ariel, the chief sylph in the Rape of the Lock, has the same name as Prospero's servant in Shakespeare's The Tempest, and Shakespeare's character is described literally as an airy spirit in the dramatis personae. This name is generally thought to have been original with Shakespeare, though the exact inspiration for the character is unclear. Pope explicitly cited Comte de Gablus as a source for elemental lore in the dedication. In the 1778 British novel The Sylph, a sylph appears as a guardian spirit for the female protagonist. By 1765, the French author Jean-François Section Marmontel had found the sylph legend notable enough that he included among his moral tales the story of the sylph husband, in which a young woman obsessed with the idea of marrying a sylph is deluded into falling in love with her arranged husband after he impersonates one. Willow, a character in Terry Brooks' Magic Kingdom of Landover series of novels, is a sylph and the wife of protagonist Ben Holiday. She is the daughter of the River Master and a wood elemental, giving her pale green skin and emerald hair. Her dual nature is reflected in the fact that she must transform into a willow tree once every 21 days to maintain her life force. She has a tense and distant relationship with her father, as her existence serves as a permanent reminder to him of the brief relationship he desires to reclaim, but never can. And so it is to her mother that she turns for guidance. Theatre. The famous ballet La Sylphide Sylph, Paris, 1832, is a prominent example of sylph lore in theatre in the 19th century. It appeared in a second version in Denmark in 1836. A similarly themed opera The Mountain Sylph appeared in England in 1834. Sylphs again took to the stage in the 1909 ballet Les Sylphides. Fairy Link, because of their association with the ballet La Sylphide, where sylphs are identified with fairies and the medieval legends of fairyland, as well as a confusion with other airy spirits, a slender girl may be referred to as a sylph. Sylph has passed into general language as a term for minor spirits, elementals, or fairies of the air. Fantasy authors will sometimes employ sylphs in their fiction, for example creating giant artistic clouds in the skies with airy wings. Hermetic Teachings. There are 4 orders of elements and each has a ruling elemental over it: spirits of earth gnomes, spirits of air sylphs, spirits of water ondines, spirits of fire salamanders. See also. References. Bibliography, Regardie, Israel. The Golden Dawn, the original account of the teachings, rites and ceremonies of the Hermetic Order. Llewellyn Publications. ISBN 9780875426631. Von Hohenheim, Theophrast. Sudhoff, K. Mattheyaen, W., ed. Saar Currenziengleich Worker, Act 1, v. 14, Sec 7, Liber de Nymphies, Sylphies, Pygmaeis a Salamandris a Decoratorus Spiritibus. Munich, Oldenburg. De Montfaucon de Villiers, N. The Brothers, ed. Comte de Gablus. London, The Old Bourne Press. Pope, Alexander. Joseph Black, Leonard Connolly, Kate Flint, Isabel Grundy, Don Lepan, Roy Liwitzer, Jerome J., Anne Lake Prescott, Barry V. Quillis, Claire Waters, eds. The Rape of the Lock. The Broadview Anthology of British Literature. Broadview Press pages 443 456.